Geneva, a city synonymous with diplomacy. But behind the closed doors of this Swiss city, the stakes are nothing short of catastrophic. For the third time in just a few weeks, American and Iranian officials have sat down, not face-to-face, but through an Omani mediator, for what experts are calling the most crucial talks in a decade. The goal? To prevent a full-blown conflict in the Middle East. On one side of the table, you have the Trump administration, which has simultaneously ramped up its rhetoric and its military presence. On the other, a defiant Iranian regime, battered by sanctions but refusing to bow to American demands. Today, we're going to unpack exactly what happened in those 3 hours of talks, why the U.S. has built up an armada in the region, and whether we are truly heading toward another war or a historic breakthrough. Thursday's talks adjourned after just 3 hours. On the surface, that might seem short for discussions that could decide the fate of nations, but sometimes, in diplomacy, brevity suggests seriousness. The mediator, Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, emerged with a cautiously optimistic tone. He stated that negotiators had exchanged, in his words, creative and positive ideas. They plan to return after a break. We hope to make more progress, he added. But let's be clear about what indirect talks means. The Iranian delegation, led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, sits in one room. The U.S. team, represented by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, sits in another. The Omani minister shuttles between them, carrying messages. It's a process built on distrust, designed to prevent a diplomatic incident if talks collapse. The core issue remains the same as it has been for decades, Iran's nuclear program. But the context is terrifyingly new. This is the largest U.S. military buildup in the region since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. 2 aircraft carriers, fighter jets, refueling aircraft, and thousands of troops are now positioned within striking distance of Iran. So why the armada? President Trump has been characteristically blunt. He has stated he prefers diplomacy, but he has also publicly floated the idea of limited strikes on Iran. The message seems to be, accept a deal or we will force you to accept one. This represents a significant shift. Just 8 months ago, the U.S. bombed Iranian nuclear facilities in coordination with Israel during a brief but intense exchange of fire. Trump claimed those facilities were obliterated. Now he is threatening to finish the job if Tehran doesn't utter what he calls the secret words. In his recent State of the Union address, Trump laid out his case vaguely but ominously. He claimed Iran is building missiles that could soon reach the U.S. and accused the country of restarting its weapons program. His red line? We will never have a nuclear weapon, he wants Iran to say. Ironically, just hours before Trump spoke, the Iranian foreign minister posted on social media, stating explicitly that Iran would under no circumstances ever develop a nuclear weapon. It was a message seemingly tailored to counter the president's speech, yet the White House dismissed it. They want those words in a binding agreement, not a tweet.
So, what does Iran want, and what are they willing to give up? Tehran has officially rejected the U.S. demand to completely stop enriching uranium. However, sources suggest they are prepared to offer significant concessions. The discussions in Geneva are reportedly exploring a regional consortium for uranium enrichment, a concept from past negotiations that would allow Iran some level of the program under strict international oversight. Then there's the stockpile. Iran currently holds roughly 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. That is a massive leverage point. Any deal would have to address where that material goes, whether it is shipped out of the country or diluted to a lower, safer level. But here is the major roadblock. Iran has already drawn a red line on 2 specific issues. First, they refuse to discuss their ballistic missile program. Second, they will not negotiate an end to their support for regional proxies, the network Tehran proudly calls the axis of resistance. This includes Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia militias in Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen. For Iran, this isn't just foreign policy, it's a core tenet of their revolutionary ideology and their strategic depth against Israel. And that brings us to the elephant in the room, Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made it clear that any deal excluding Iran's missile program and its proxies is unacceptable. Analysts believe Netanyahu is pushing Washington not just for a deal, but for regime change, the toppling of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Netanyahu visited the White House just weeks ago, and his influence on this administration cannot be overstated. While the U.S. has the world's second-largest nuclear arsenal, Israel is also widely believed to be a nuclear power, though it maintains a policy of ambiguity. They view a nuclear-capable Iran as an existential threat. So what happens if the creative ideas from Geneva fall flat? U.S. media reports, citing unnamed administration officials, suggest the president is weighing several military options. The most discussed is a limited strike on Iran's Revolutionary Guards or specific nuclear sites in the coming days. The goal would be to force Tehran back to the table on Washington's terms. If that fails, reports suggest the president might consider a broader campaign aimed at toppling the supreme leader. But this is where the military brass is reportedly sounding the alarm. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, is said to have advised the president that while the U.S. would likely win a conflict, it would be risky. Strikes could draw the U.S. into a prolonged, costly land war, exactly the kind of quagmire the Middle East has become infamous for. Iran has promised a severe response. They have threatened to strike U.S. military assets across the Middle East and target Israel directly. U.S. allied nations in the region, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, are terrified. They know that air power alone cannot change the regime in Tehran, but it could ignite a wider war that engulfs their own borders. Before the State of the Union, Secretary of State Marco Rubio delivered a classified briefing to the so-called Gang of Eight, the top congressional leaders from both parties. This is the group that gets briefed on the most sensitive intelligence, the stuff that can't be discussed on the floor of Congress. Following the briefing, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer emerged looking grim. His statement was short but telling. He said, "This is serious, and the administration has to make its case to the American people." That line is key. It suggests that whatever is being planned, whether it's a strike, a final ultimatum, or a deal, the administration hasn't yet sold it to the public, or even to Congress. For now, the diplomats are on a break. The mediators are shuttling. The armada is waiting. We are at a classic geopolitical precipice. On one side, a deal that could lift sanctions and curb Iran's nuclear program. On the other, a military confrontation that could dwarf the conflicts of the past 2 decades. Iran insists it wants a deal. The U.S. insists it prefers diplomacy. But with bombs loaded onto planes and missiles ready on mobile launchers, the margin for error in Geneva is zero. As the world watches, the clock is ticking toward either a historic handshake or a devastating boom. Thank you for watching. If you want to stay updated on this developing story, please like and subscribe. We'll be back with more as soon as the next round of talks concludes.